Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to add some interactable elements into this game, but we're also going to add some lighting as well, because it doesn't look great. It's nice and spooky and dark and dim, but I kind of want to add a lantern that we can put right here in front of our character, and I want to add some pedestals that we can turn on just by walking up to them. So let's do the lantern first, because that's pretty easy. Let's open up our player. And we need a lantern model to bring in. So I've given you one in the assignment description. You can go ahead and download that. I'm going to grab, got a lot of stuff open. I'm going to grab the lantern and drop it into my resource folder. Okay. And when I take a look inside, I have a lantern OBJ, a lantern glass texture, and then the texture for the lantern itself. Let's grab the lantern OBJ and let's make it a child of the camera. We'll make it a child of the camera. Let's bring it out into the scene, then make it a child of the camera. And then what we can do is we can, well, first we got to resize this. This thing is really big. Let's set its transform properties. Let's reset its position first of all. And let's set it down to 0.1. That might be a little small, but that's fine. Let's play around with it. Let's position it somewhere that makes sense. We want it right up close to our camera because it's going to be kind of like you're holding it in front of your face. Now, in order to see what this looks like in the game world, we can click on our camera and check this preview button. Okay, so now we have this tiny, we're going to need to make that lantern a whole lot bigger. Let's set the scale to 0.5. Okay, maybe too big. Let's go 0.3. Okay, that's a little better. And we're going to want to uncheck preview. Let's scooch it a little bit to the left and a little bit down. Go back to camera. Okay, not bad. I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe I'll scooch it over just a little bit more. Great, looks great. So if you imagine this is what it's going to look like, we'll have our lantern kind of hovering in front of our face. Let's save this and play the game just to see if our lantern is where it needs to be. It is, but I'm noticing a problem. Notice how my lantern is casting a shadow on the ground. I don't want that at all. So I'm going to select my lantern mesh here, and I'm going to come over here to, is it global? Where is it? It's in here somewhere. Visibility range maybe? No. Oh, right here. Yep, it was in geometry. So inside geometry, there's this option called cast shadow. We're going to turn that off. Okay. And we want to add a light to this lantern. So let's add a, let's add a new child node and let's look for a light. So we're going to want an Omni Light 3D. Let's add that. Now it's inside my lantern right now. Let's go ahead and change the color of my light. I'm going to make it an orange, kind of like a fire kind of light. Okay. But notice that the light's not penetrating through this area here. This mesh is blocking the light from here. So what we want to do is select our lantern and let's use this glass material. And we need to override our surface. So surface material override, and the one we're looking for is number 1. So if we drag this glass material onto number 1 and drop it, now we get what we're looking for. Okay, and then we can increase the energy of the light if we want to. I like that. Or the indirect energy if we want. We can increase the fog as it messes around with the, let's turn off the preview. Whatever. So we can play around with this to make some really cool effects. Let's test it and see what it looks like so far. Okay, oh, that looks great. So we're not casting that shadow anymore, and we've got a nice lighting effect going on. Okay, perfect. We can spend more time playing around with that, obviously adding, changing the energy, changing the everything. We can change all kinds of stuff in here. I'm not going to play with it because we have more things to do. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create a system where we can look at an object and interact with it. Okay, to do that, we're going to need something called a raycast. So if we take a look at our character here, this is, imagine this is our head, right? Because we have our head object. Imagine that we shot a laser beam out of the front of our face here, right? That's called a raycast. So we can create a laser beam that shoots out of the front, an invisible laser beam, right? We can set how long it is, and then whenever that laser beam touches something, we can return the collider that we touched, okay? So to do that, we need to create a, we need to add a raycast. Let's add it as a child of the camera so that it's always facing the same direction as the camera. So add a child node, raycast 3D. So now it's going to create this raycast. When we can see the ray, it's going down by default. So here, let's rename this first. Let's rename it to interaction controller. That's a good name for it. And let's change it so the ray is facing the front instead of going straight down. So over here we have target position. We're going to change that to 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, and let's say -2 on the Z. And look, now we have our laser beam shooting out in front of our character. And the nice thing is, notice that our lantern isn't interacting with the laser beam as well. We don't want that. If our lantern is in front of our raycast, then it's going to always be returning something, even though the lantern doesn't have a collider. Lantern doesn't have a collider. So, okay, so now we have our laser beam. Now we got to figure out how do we get this thing to actually interact with something else. Okay. Well, first we need to create a prompt that can show up on the screen whenever this thing interacts with something. So to create a prompt, we're going to need a label. So as a child of our interaction controller, let's add a label. Okay, and so this is basically, imagine this would be your game screen. We want to put our label somewhere where it's going to be seen. Let's just put it directly in the middle. I'm going to make it nice and big. And then to anchor it in the center, we can come up here and click here and click the center button. It'll anchor it right in the middle for us, okay? All right, now let's throw some text in this label real quick just to see, kind of test it out, see what it looks like. I'm going to put brackets E interact, okay? Now it's up in the left-hand corner. I don't want that, so I'm going to change the horizontal alignment to center and the vertical alignment to center, and it's really small. So let's set a new, let's create some new label settings. So new label settings. Let's change the font size to, I don't know, 24 looks good. And you can change the font here if you want, or the color. We can make it that same kind of orangish color that we set for our light if we really want to. I'm going to keep it white for now. Okay, let's test our game and see what this looks like. Oh, great. So now we have a prompt in front of us to interact, but it's not going away. Okay. We need to set this up so that it will hide itself all the time, but whenever we bump into something that we can interact with, it turns on the interact prompt. Okay, so let's rename the label real quick so that we can so we know what this is. So let's call it interaction prompt. That's a good name for it. Okay, let's delete the text here so that it's not showing anything when we play. That way we don't have that showing up. Perfect. Okay. So next what we want to do is let's add a script to our interaction controller. And this script is going to allow us to display that prompt whenever we need to. So let's do that. Let's add a script. There we go. Interaction controller, and let's create. Okay. So what do we want to do here? Well, we want to be able to basically, you know what? We're going to need something else. We are going, what is this? Oh, that's the other script we're about to write. Let me close that real quick and get that out of there. All right. So what do we want? Well, we're going to need something called a, we'll call it an interactable object script. Okay. But it's not going to be attached to anything yet. We're basically going to create it as a script by itself, and then anything that we want to interact with, we can extend this script. So right now, this script that we just created is extending Raycast 3D because we've attached it to a Raycast 3D node. We want to create a script that when we attach it to an object, it doesn't extend the node of the object we just attached it to, it extends another script, right? This isn't going to make sense until we actually do it. So let's do it. Come down here and let's right click and new script. We're going to create a brand new script and let's call it Interactable Object. Okay, Interactable Object. There we go. And create. And let's open up that Interactable Object script. Notice that it says we extend node because node is the default node for everything. We don't want that to let's go ahead and delete that. I know. I've told you forever. Don't ever mess with line 1. We're going to mess with line 1 today. So we're going to create this script as something called a class. A class in programming is a special kind of object that can be derived by anything else. Technically, all the nodes that we've been playing with are classes. All right, so we're going to create our own custom class. So let's set the class underscore name, and let's set it equal to interactable object, just like our script. And then let's extend node 3D, because there may be some stuff we're going to need. Oh yeah, we need to be able to export variables and whatnot. So yeah, we'll extend node 3D. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to create some export variables. These variables are going to be variables that we can change on any of these objects that get the script so that we can make it a little bit more customizable. So for example, the first export variable we're going to create is called, let's do var interact underscore prompt. So, and this is going to be a string. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to type whatever we want to pop up whenever we hover over that thing, right? So if I were, for example, to attach this script to a tree, whenever I walk up to the tree, I can customize the string so that it pops up and it says chop down tree, or, you know, press E to chop, or whatever, okay? We also want an export variable that determines if this can be interacted with or not, because sometimes we want to like turn off the capability to interact. So we'll say can interact, and we'll call this a bool, or this is going to be a boolean, meaning it's either true or false. And let's set this equal to true by default. Okay, so the other thing that we need in this script is a function that can be overridden, or an overrided function. The way override functions work is we basically have to create the function here in this script, and then whenever we create a script for, then we can override this function in other scripts. Basically, we can call that function and do something with it in a different script. So let's just create the override function here, func underscore interact. And then inside here, we'll just say print override this function. Basically, we just want this function to be here. Whenever we call this function, we're going to write new functionality to this function so that it does what we want it to do, depending on the object that this is attached to. Okay. Again, this is kind of object-oriented programming, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to understand if you've never taken an advanced programming class. But just know that this is going to allow us to create all kinds of customizable interactable objects. Okay, let's save this. Let's save all of it. Save everything. And let's go back to our interaction controller. Now that we have our interactable object and some variables that we can play with, now we can finish writing this script. Okay, so in here, we're going to keep it extends Raycast because we need some some of the code in Raycast 3D to help us do what we want to do. On ready, we need to get a reference to the interaction prompt label. so that we can change the text. So var interaction prompt. It is of type label, and it's going to be equal to $, interaction prompt. So that's going to take this interaction prompt label and store it in a new variable for us. Okay. Now let's bring in our process function. And inside the process function, we want to get the collider of the object that our raycast has collided with. Okay, so it's pretty easy. We can say var object equals get collider. Now, get collider is a function that is native to Raycast 3D, and it basically says get whatever we've collided with, and let's grab let's grab that and store it inside of a new variable called object. Let's change our interaction prompt to an empty string for now, so we don't see anything on our screen. Oh, interaction prompt dot text to an empty string. Okay. We could actually probably do that in the ready function just to make it a little bit cleaner. We don't need to do that. Well, no, we want to do it every frame because if we're not looking at it anymore, we want it to reset to something. Yeah, never mind. I'm second guessing myself, but I shouldn't. I wrote it the right way the first time. All right, so next we're going to use an if statement that may look confusing, but let me explain it as we go. So we're going to say if object, so meaning if we've collided with something, and object is interactable object. Okay. Oof, that looks confusing. So if object and object is interactable object. So imagine there's like some parentheses around this. So basically if we've collided with an object at all, and if the object we've collided with has this interactable object script attached to it. If it does, then we want to do something. And the thing we want to do is if object, first we're going to check to see if it can be interacted with, can interact. If can interact is false, then we want to return. Basically ignore that collision and just move on, okay? But if it can, so then we're going to say interaction prompt. Oh, prompt underscore label dot text. Interaction prompt. Oh, I called that. Okay, so interaction prompt. Yeah, so what we're doing, sorry, I got confused because I renamed my variables since the last time I did this. So interaction prompt. So we're trying to change the text of our label here. Okay, I made that way more complicated than it should have been. And we'll say equals, and we're going to do those brackets E, and then plus object dot interact underscore prompt, because that interact prompt variable that we created here, we want to get whatever the custom string is going to be for that specific thing that we just made. Okay, now then we want to handle actually interacting with that thing. Okay, so let's say if input dot is action not just released, just pressed, and the action, we don't actually have the action we're looking for yet. So let's go to our project settings. Let's set up a new action. Oh, I have here interact. Did we do this in this video? Anyway, if we haven't, go into add new action, type interact, and tie it to the E key. Okay, so we're looking for the interact action. So if the input action just pressed is interact, then we're going to object dot underscore interact. Basically, we're going to call the interact function on that specific object. Okay? Whew. All right. So our interaction system is now set up. Basically, we have our raycast, which is going to determine if we're colliding with an object that can be interacted with. If it is, we're going to do specific things. We have our interactable object script, which is allowing us to make to create interactable objects just by attaching the script to them. Okay, now we need an interactable object of some kind. So let's save everything real quick. Let's go back to our 3D view and let's go to our world. Let's add a pedestal into our game right about here. So over here in the models, you should have a pedestal model, and we have a pedestal.tscn. This is a specific scene that we can just drag right into. Why is it so off-center, though? Let's open up the pedestal scene real quick. Oh, it's way off-center. All right, let's set its position. Oh gosh. Oh, it's the same issue as before. Okay. Oh, I have the light bulb selected. That's why. Then let's go to transform. Okay, so we'll put that in the center. Let's save it. Go back to the world, and now the pedestal should be a little bit closer to where we want. All right, let's just put a pedestal in the world. It doesn't matter where. Now this pedestal, we're going to turn this into an interactable object, but it needs a script in order to do that, okay? So let's attach a script to this pedestal. Now we could do it here, or we can do it inside the pedestal specifically. Let's do it inside the pedestal scene. So let's grab the pedestal and add the script and click create. Now inside of this pedestal, instead of extending static body 3D, we're going to extend interactable object. So this is now turned into an object that we can interact with. And when we save this, notice that if I click my pedestal and I go to the top, I have those two exported variables here. Notice they're not in this script, but because we're extending interactable object, we get them because we're extending this script itself. So it's basically like saying we're using this script and the script that we've attached, right? So, perfect. Now the only thing we need to do is override that interact function. So here we have interact, which says print override this function. Here we can just override that function by writing func underscore interact. Now what's going to happen is whenever we do something, whenever we call the interact function on this object, it's going to do whatever we write into here instead of what's in the extended script. Okay, let's just print yay ... pedestal. Okay, so we're just going to print something to the screen. Let's save and let's play. So as we walk up to the pedestal, notice that I don't have a message. When we walk up to it and get close enough, notice that my prompt popped up. Now it's empty, it's just the E. I need to change my interact prompt to get it, tell it what to do, but it goes away when I'm not looking at it, right? Okay, now if I were to press the E key, notice down there at the bottom, it's saying yay pedestal every time I click on it, okay? So we know our pedestal is working properly. Let's fix those other two problems we found. First of all, my interact prompt. Let's say turn on light. That's the prompt that I want for my interaction prompt. So whenever I hit, or when I get close to the pedestal, I want it to say turn on the light. Now, let's turn on the light. So the best way to do this is to take a look at our light bulb object here. Our light bulb, for now, is turned off. If I were to turn that on, notice that we get a light bulb, or this light that hovers over the pedestal. We turn it on or off. Over here in my visibility, it's the same thing as turning on this option. Now, any option here in the inspector, we can change via code. So let's do that. So instead of printing something, let's instead say var light bulb. We need a reference to the light bulb. Actually, we don't even need a reference. Let's just say $, light bulb dot visible equals true. Okay. Then let's turn off the interactability of this pedestal because we don't want to actually interact with it anymore. So can interact equals false. It's that simple. So let's save it, save our scenes, and let's go ahead and play. So now I've got my lantern. When I walk up to this pedestal, notice it says E, turn on light. If I hit the E key, watch what happens. Oh, my light turns on, and I get this really cool, nice looking light, and I can't interact with the pedestal anymore. It is turned off. So that concept we can apply to literally any other object we want to interact with in the scene. Collectibles that we want to pick up, doors we want to open, you know, anything, right? So this is a very powerful thing that we've just learned how to do today. Hopefully some of it made sense. Hopefully it wasn't super confusing. Let's see, where should we go from here? I don't know. I'll figure it out, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever it might be. All right. Peace.